You know when you're sitting on an airplane and the person next to you starts chatting with you, the inevitable question comes up. So, what do you do for a living? Now, I really don't like this question. It's pretty easy if you can say, oh yeah, I'm a barista at Starbucks. But I have to look at them and say, I study religion. So after this exchange, two things usually happen. The conversation either gets shut down immediately after that. Oh, religion, that's awkward. I'm sorry I even asked. Either that or I become the resident expert on theological topic A or theological topic B. Oh, you study religion? So, do you think Adam and Eve are real people? Oh, you study religion? Do you think Jesus is fully God and fully human? Trust me, it's really awkward being mistaken as a priest. Now, I think these awkward situations stem from a fundamental misunderstanding on what religious studies is as an academic discipline. Spoiler alert, theology and religious studies are different. Very different. David Ford, professor of theology at Cambridge University, defines theology as thinking about questions raised by and about religion. These questions include questions about meaning, or beauty, or truth, or best practices in how we live our lives, and often how these questions of meaning, beauty, and truth pertain to the divine, or God, or the transcendent, whatever your specific tradition believes. So for example, Buddhism posits some propositions. All life is suffering, the source of suffering is desire. To stop suffering, you must rid yourself of desire, and you do this by following the Eightfold Path. So the Buddhist theologian would try to answer these questions raised by these propositions. How do we reach nirvana? Can you still release yourself from suffering by holding on to material wealth? So that's theology at its most basic. It's God talk. It's trying to answer the questions that a particular faith raises. And theology is often self-critical and self-reflective. So a Christian theologian would try to contribute to the tradition of Christianity, while a Buddhist theologian would contribute to the tradition and communities of Buddhism. Academic theology of this nature is often called confessional theology. The audience of such theology would be fellow insiders of the faith community, as the theologian critiques or encourages members of that belief system. Now, secular universities also have theology departments, and we wouldn't necessarily call these confessional. They don't necessarily advocate a particular religion, but they conduct in-depth analysis of religious beliefs and how they pertain to society at large. Thinking about questions raised by and about religion doesn't necessarily mean that you're a devoted believer yourself. Now, on the other hand, religious studies is a different academic discipline. Religious studies is not inherently interested in the questions that a certain religion raises, but rather religious studies focuses on the human dimension of religion. Rather, the community, rituals, politics, and texts that humans have made that all tie back to religion. So let's use our Buddhism example again. A Buddhist religious studies expert wouldn't ask questions like, how do we release ourselves from suffering? They would ask questions like, what was it about East Asia in the 6th century BCE that gave rise to this idea of suffering? What effects do Buddhist beliefs and practices have on society? Or why is the population of Buddhism remaining flat while the populations of Christianity and Islam are rising in the 21st century? Now notice how these questions differ from our earlier questions. They aren't so much focused on the divine or the transcendent, but rather focused on the human processes of religion. J.Z. Smith, who I mentioned last episode in this series, puts it this way: religion is an inextricably human phenomenon. Religious studies are therefore most appropriately described in relation to the humanities and the human sciences, in relation to anthropology rather than theology. So this means scholars of religious studies focus the tools of the humanities and the natural sciences onto religion. Sociology, archaeology, anthropology, history. There are even some really interesting studies from neuroscientists and psychologists, all bringing their expertise to bear on religion and how it functions as a human phenomenon. Now, of course, there is always going to be some overlap. I don't want to set up some false dichotomy and say, oh, all theologians are biased and all religious studies scholars are perfectly neutral. Theologians also rely on anthropology and sociology in their research. And some religious studies scholars are religious themselves and must try to bracket their religious belief to remain neutral and unbiased in their research. Theologians can wear both hats, and they often have joint appointments at theology and religion departments at secular universities. Rather than a biased versus neutral dichotomy, let's just say theology and religious studies ask different questions, and our method of research differ in many ways. Now, Religion for Breakfast is an unapologetically religious studies channel. That is to say, you'll never see a video on this channel asking, what is the nature of God? These are questions for theologians to answer because they are questions raised by specific religions. We are focused on the human dimension of religion because that's what religion is, a wildly complex reflection of human thought and desires and actions that have manifested themselves over thousands of years of human history. I just wish I could more succinctly explain that to the guy on the airplane. As always, thanks for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe or check out our newly launched Patreon page if you'd like to become a financial backer of the show. Our last episode in the Religion 101 series, where we tried to define religion, actually generated some pretty good discussion. One subscriber really liked Tyler's definition of religion, that all religion is somehow belief in supernatural beings. But I would argue that not all religion requires belief in supernatural beings. Someone that doesn't define themselves as religious, but they still believe in karma, or they still believe in like an aura or energy field. None of this is really theistic, and even though they would say they're spiritual but not religious, this is still religion on some level. So I would push back against this idea that all religion requires belief in supernatural beings. Maybe belief in something that's supernatural or trans-empirical, but not necessarily beings. This all goes to show how difficult it is to define religion. No matter what your definition is, you can almost always find an exception. So this is where the family resemblances definition comes in handy, because it doesn't require every religion to fit into your definition. Feel free to comment on this current video and I'll try my best to answer your questions next episode. Thanks again.